Welcome to our City Council meeting on the 16th of August. It is now 7 o'clock. Can we have call to order? Well, that's me. So, okay, I've done that. So Vice Mayor Ortiz, would you please say the Pledge of Allegiance or start us out, please?
Happily. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Wait till the flag shows up. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Can we have a report out from our closed session to our City Attorney, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Burlingame City Council met in closed session, and there was no reportable action. Take me a while to get that right. Sorry about that.
Thank you. All right, we have a few upcoming events. The Park and Rec Department are now accepting applications for the Youth Advisory Committee for grades 7 to 12. The application period ends on the 27th of August. The application can be found on the Park and Rec Youth and Teens page on the city website. Enrollment for after-school sports ends on September 1st. There will be a family campout. It's coming back this fall on the 17th of September, and you can sign up through the Park and Rec registration system. There's still time to sign up for the Bocce Ball League that starts on the 6th of September. You can sign up as a team, 4 to 8 people, or as a free agent. Games are on Wednesday evenings. Starting today, the library hours are from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. And then on Saturday, it is from 12 to 4. Just a reminder that the Summer Learning Challenge for kids actually runs through the end of this month, so August 31st. So there is time to finish and collect a prize. Also, everyone should have received, or in the very near future, receive their ballot for the September 14th gubernatorial recall election. The city of Burlingame has 2 24/7 mail ballot drop boxes. One is actually outside of City Hall, and then the other one is located at the Park and Rec Portables on Burlingame Avenue. For those who want to vote in person, City Hall will be a voting center, and that will start on the 4th of September. And if you want more information on the election and the voting center hours, you can go to the website smcvote.org. Does anyone else want to mention any upcoming events? Okay. If not, we do not have any presentations this evening, so that leads us to our public comments. Members of the public may speak about any item that is not on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to suggest an item for a future council agenda may do so during this public comment period. The Ralph M. Brown Act prohibits the City Council from acting on any matter that is not on the agenda. So Megan, did we get any emails in regards to anyone that wants to relay information for public comment?
No, we did not.
Okay, so then I'm going to open it up to public comment, and I have Jennifer Pfaff. Jennifer, you want to unmute yourself?
Sorry, I just can't get this right. Welcome back to everybody. I just had a quick comment regarding the Memories of Art in the Park event. I went over yesterday just to take some pictures, not knowing exactly what it was going to be. And yeah, it was small. I mean, obviously compared to real art in the park, the way it was, but I just wanted to say big kudos. Whoever, I don't know if it's Parks and Rec or the Chamber or whoever thought of it, or you guys, It was really, really nice. And I went wanting to take pictures, and I left having bought a couple $100 worth of gifts. So I felt like it was definitely worth my time for a lot of reasons. And hopefully you might consider this as a regular event rather than just this one-off. I don't know what the plan is, but I wanted to give positive feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. We appreciate the positive compliments. Anyone else like to make any public comment that is not on the agenda? Okay. I will then move forward to the consent calendar. We have items 8A through, we have quite a few this evening, 8N. Is there anyone that would like to pull anything off the consent calendar? Councilmember Brownrigg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to briefly discuss item 8J, as in juniper.
Okay. And then I would like to pull off, just to make a comment on item 8E. All right, I'll go to public comment. Is there anyone that would like to pull something off the consent calendar? It doesn't look like it. Megan, was there anyone that emailed?
No, we didn't receive any emails to pull things off.
Okay, so then to my colleagues, can I have someone make a motion for the consent calendar, not including items 8E and 8J?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Second.
So motion made by Vice Mayor Ortiz, seconded by Councilmember Brownrigg. Those in favor? Oh, sorry. I need to have Megan voice vote. Or roll call, sorry.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ortiz,
Yes.
Mayor O'Brien.
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. All right, item 8E, and I'm just making this comment for the benefit of the public. We do know that if the price exceeds a certain amount, it comes back, to the council to look at. But in this circumstance, with the playground equipment, since there was going to be an increase of 8%, our staff felt it important to make that decision right away to save us money. And so I appreciate that, using common sense and good judgment to save us money, and look forward to this new playground equipment. So on that note, I will make a motion to approve item 8E.
Second.
Actually, I do have to open it up to public comment, correct, City Attorney? I jumped that a little too quickly.
Yeah, that's correct. If you could please open it up to
Yes,
public
okay.
comment.
Thank you. Anyone from the public like to comment on item 8E? Okay, does not look like it. My colleagues, anyone want to make a comment? And then Megan, anyone email any comment related to item 8E?
No, we didn't receive any emails.
Okay, so then on that, let's have a roll call on the motion made by myself and then seconded by, who was it seconded by?
Councilmember Coulson,
Thank you, Councilmember Coulson.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ortiz,
Yes.
Mayor O'Brien.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. On to item 8J. Councilmember Brownrigg, is it a comment that you have, or is it a question that you'd like to ask staff?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a question, if I could. And I know this contract has been through the ringer a few times, and I just don't remember if we spoke about this before, but this concerns Broadway pedestrian street lighting improvements. And my question for, I think, our Director of Public Works is whether this includes decorative fixtures, or is this an opportunity to go beyond safety and actually dress up Broadway, which feels to me like a good opportunity if it is. So it has to do with the aesthetic or design component of the lighting plan, which I tried to find and couldn't.
Thank you, Councilmember Brownrigg. Yes, in simple terms, the answer is yes. The Broadway pedestrian street lighting components will include fixtures that are decorative, and they are similar to the one that are used at Broadway overpass. So it's consistent theme of lighting all the way from El Camino Real to the Rollins Road area, just abutting the new overpass.
That's going to be very nice. The ones on the overpass, if I remember, are they the candle type?
They are, yes, they are the candle type. They're a newer version, what we used to have on Broadway. And they are the ones that we went through a vetting process long before we selected that. And Caltrans and Federal Highway Administration were part of that, the approval process. So those were the lights that were chosen for the project.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And I should have asked you bilaterally, except I didn't focus on it. But I do think it's terrific if these lights can bring a touch of additional style to Broadway. And I'm delighted to hear that we're going to match the overpass. I think that's going to be a very elegant solution. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Director Murtuza. Do my colleagues have any questions or comments in regards to this item? Okay, if not, I will open up to public comment. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment on item 8J? It doesn't look like it, so I'm going to close public comment. Megan, is there anyone that sent an email?
No, I didn't receive any emails on this.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Would someone like to make a motion, please?
So
Thank you,
moved, Madam Mayor.
And I'll second.
Motion made by Councilmember Beach, seconded by Councilmember Brownrigg.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ortiz,
Yes.
Mayor O'Brien.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Thank you. On to public hearings. We have item 9A. And this is the introduction of ordinances amending chapters 15.04 and 15.08 of the Burlingame Municipal Code to update sewer capacity charges and introduce water capacity charges for the new development and redevelopment projects. Can we have a staff report, Director Murtuza?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. Before I begin to review the staff report, I would like to introduce Senior Civil Engineer Mahesh Shagluri, who's been working on this project, and also Alex Handler from Bartlewells Associates, who prepared the sewer and water capacity charges study for the city. They're both here to answer any questions. Megan, if you could assign them as a panelist, just in case if any questions come up. So with regards to some background, as the council may recall that staff presented the water and sewer infrastructure capacity charges at the July 6th council meeting, and there are attachments to that staff report. And this is a follow-up to that council direction at that meeting. In summary, water and sewer infrastructure charges are one-time fees paid upfront as a condition of development designed to recover cost of capacity in existing infrastructure, which benefits new development and redevelopment projects. These charges are paid by new projects to buy in their fair share of the city's water and sewer infrastructure, for which the existing ratepayers have long been contributing to. These charges are collected through water and sewer connection fees and provide a separate source of revenue that would offset the overall funding needs for the water and sewer system and corresponding rates. In the absence of capacity charges, the existing utility ratepayers would assume the burden of providing infrastructure capacity for new development. City of Burlingame does not currently levy any water infrastructure capacity charge on new projects. The city does levy sewer capacity charges on new developments. However, the current sewer capacity charges are very low as they were developed back in 1982, and they do not reflect the current costs and should be updated. When staff initially presented this information to council at the July 6th meeting, we had assumed the minimum water size meter for capacity calculation as 5/8" meter, which we later learned that actually the size is 3/4" meter. So the tables of fees have been updated since then. The proposed water and sewer capacity charges are summarized in tables 1 and 2 on page 2 and 3 of the staff report. I will not go into the detail, but to briefly mention that both charges and both tables include charges for residential and non-residential developments. The residential category is broken down into single-family, multifamily dwellings, and ADUs, accessory dwelling units. For existing single-family connections, no additional capacity charges would apply to any remodeling or expansion of a home, even if the project results in a need to increase the meter size for fire flow or other purposes. For existing multifamily connections, capacity charges would apply for new units, and existing units will be credited. The ADUs, there is a government code 65852.2, which provides guidance regarding that. So any ADU with less than 150 square feet will not, there will be no fee for that. However, ADUs with more than 150 square feet addition within the footprint of the existing home or separately, there will be fees associated with that as provided in the table. The water charges are based on the meter sizes and water demand for projects, standard development projects. And if there are projects that are non-standard that we don't have charge for that, then we will do a study and analyze that and determine proper charges as part of the ordinance. The ordinance also includes a provision for adjusting the fees for construction cost inflation that will be done annually in January to conform to the latest construction cost index for San Francisco as published in the Engineering News Record. The basis and the details are shown in the staff report. At the July 6th meeting, the City Council expressed their desire to consider giving affordable housing concessions on capacity charges. City does currently provide significant concessions for the affordable housing unit in terms of density bonus, relaxed height restrictions, and parking requirements. Staff researched the agencies throughout the Bay Area, and we're unable to find any agency that provide concessions on capacity charges for affordable housing units. However, should the council consider granting concessions on these capacity charges, because these charges are associated or related to the water and sewer enterprise funds, which are governed by the Proposition 218, any relief provided for these charges should be backfilled with general fund dollars to avoid placing burden on the utility ratepayers. Additionally, staff reached out to developers who have had projects in the city to obtain their feedback regarding the infrastructure fees charges. They presented this July 6th meeting. Of the 6 developers contacted, we heard from 2 of them. They seem to be receptive and did not indicate any problems, as they do pay those fees in other cities. Also, council had requested staff information regarding other fees that the city currently charges for new development, which is also attached in the staff report, These ordinances are not subject to CEQA in accordance with section 15378 of the state CEQA guidelines, as well as section 15061 subsection B and subsection 3, as noted in the staff report. Finally, with regards to fiscal impact, if approved, new projects would contribute revenue to water and sewer enterprise funds, which would help the ratepayers and contribute towards upgrading the water and sewer infrastructure. We are unable to provide a revenue estimate at this time because it all depends on the extent of the growth in new development and redevelopment projects. And also, in addition, if council is interested in providing concessions to affordable housing, it will have an impact on general fund, which we are unable to calculate still because we don't know the extent of that as well. So with that, I will stop here and ask for and just be ready to answer any questions if you have.
Thank you, Director Martusa. Any questions? Okay, it doesn't look like it. So I'm going to open it up to public comment. Is there anyone that would like to make a public comment?
Since this is ordinances, Madam Mayor, do you first want me to read the
Oh,
titles?
sure. Yes. Thank you.
So there's two proposed ordinances. So the first one is an ordinance of the City of Burlingame amending Chapter 15.08 of Title 15 of the Burlingame Municipal Code to update the sewer system capacity charges, CEQA determination exempt pursuant to state CEQA guidelines, sections 1538, 15601B3. And the second one is an ordinance of the City of Burlingame amending Chapter 15.04 of Title 15 of the Burlingame Municipal Code to implement new water system capacity charges, CEQA determination exempt pursuant to state CEQA guidelines, section 15378, 15601B3.
Who would like to make a motion waiving further reading?
Move to approve waiving further reading.
I'll second.
And that
Wait,
includes introducing the
introducing the-
proposed
yep.
ordinances.
And introducing the ordinances. Yes, of course.
Motion made by Vice Mayor Ortiz, seconded by Councilmember Beach.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ortiz,
Yes.
Mayor O'Brien.
Yes, motion passes. So on that note, I can now open up to public comment. Is there anyone in the public that would like to make a comment? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. I'm going to close public comment. Megan, did we receive any emails from anyone?
No, we didn't.
Okay. Colleagues, do you have any questions and or comments? Councilmember Beach.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, I just want to say I think this is good work by staff to make sure that new development and additional units above and beyond are just paying their fair share on the stress that it's putting on the infrastructure. So I think it's the right thing to do and appreciate all the work and the study that went into it to make sure we've got appropriate fees. And I certainly support bringing them back for a second reading and adoption. Thank you.
Councilmember Brownrigg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Likewise, I appreciate the work from staff, and I think this is a common sense approach. I am trying to understand why Prop 218 comes into play with respect to whether this council were to want to grant some relief to an affordable housing development. And the reason I ask is the logic seems to be that if you don't get it from the new affordable housing building, then the other utility ratepayers have to pay. But that's true anyway. I mean, in other words, this is only going on new development. So any improvements to our system are going to be borne by everybody. I'm just at a little bit of a loss to understand how Prop 218 applies here.
Director Martusa, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, Councilman Brownrigg, I'm not an expert on Prop 218, though I have had opportunities to work on Prop 218 many, many times.
Yeah, and I don't blame you. It's a very difficult statute.
It's a very difficult statute. It has been, it's very sensitive. Every time the ratepayers are involved, in the water rates are involved, it's a sensitive item. Many agencies that we have spoken to, they are staying away from, they're providing relief from general fund and other means. In one case we found, but we haven't heard from anyone that have been giving any relief, because then it is up for conflict and then we don't know really how the courts will see that. But I will not say anything more than that, because I will get into trouble by saying, it's a very complicated subject.
Well, and does the city attorney have a point of view on this?
I think, Councilmember, what I'll also add to Director Martuza's response is that because fee charges may be subject to Prop 218 challenges if done incorrectly, the conservative approach to stay away or to stay clear of a Prop 218 challenge is the staff approach here, which is to only apply this to the ratepayers and not to try to add any additional policy considerations that were considered by the council at your previous study session. And so what staff is presenting is a conservative approach in terms of trying to stay clear of any potential Prop 218 challenges.
So I appreciate that, and thank you for the explanation. And in light of both our budget constraints and our staff constraints, I won't propose putting the city in the way of potential litigation. That said, I think it's disappointing that we couldn't find a way to create a direct incentive for more affordable units. But I will take this as given, and thank you for the explanation.
And I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, if I could. I just want a clarification on that, because if I understood the Public Works Director to say that yes, we could do that, but the difference would have to come out of the general fund to make up the difference, so that we're in compliance with Prop 18. Am I understanding that correctly? So we do have the option.
We do, but it just comes out of our general fund.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
And sorry, just for what it's worth, it does strike me that there's a little bit of a difference from us foregoing revenue, which is what we do if we give a concession to an affordable housing developer. We go without that revenue versus us having to actually write a check to make up the revenue that's lost. So so I do think it's different than the mechanism that I hoped might exist, but doesn't.
I do want to add that, I actually initially brought this up at our last council meeting, but, after reading the staff report, there are a lot of incentives for affordable housing, whether it's, state density bonus or decreased parking. I mean, there are incentives for affordable housing. So I do kind of like the consistency now going across the board with all new development, whether it's considered affordable housing or not. Councilmember Coulson.
I also just want to point out that we surveyed 6 of the big developers that are doing affordable housing in our city, and 4 of them didn't even respond to the question. So if you can't even take the time to respond to the question, it seems like it's not an imperative situation. And of the 2 who did respond, both of them said they were fine with the fee increases. So for me, why would we? I don't feel like we need to go solving a problem that doesn't seem to exist on the back of the general fund budget. I guess the one option, if down the road we find that these fees are causing the affordable units somehow not to be built or creating excessive costs, one possibility that maybe our legal team and finance team could look into would be to use our affordable housing fees to supplement this. But personally, I don't think I really want to use my affordable housing fees to supplement a developer, because that's basically kind of the way it's ending up at the end of the day. I'd rather use them more directly to supplement the renters.
Thank you, Councilmember Coulson. Any other questions? Vice Mayor Ortiz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I have to agree with Councilmember Coulson. I think we already have density parking and other bonuses to encourage affordable housing. So I agree that this, again, we do have the option to change it in the future, but I think that this makes sense going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So in order to move forward, can we have a reading of the title?
We already did that, Madam Mayor, but if you would like we should do a motion to bring it back at our next meeting for second adoption.
Okay.
Second reading. Sorry.
All right, so then do I need to open it up to?
No, we already
It's
did
already
that.
at once? Okay, very good.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to bring it back as with the direction from council as given.
Second,
We have a second? Okay. Motion made by Councilmember Brownrigg, seconded by Vice Mayor Ortiz. Megan, can we have a roll call?
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ortiz,
yes.
Mayor O'Brien.
Yes. Motion passes and we'll come back for a second reading. All right, next on our agenda is item 10A, and this is a discussion of the possible continuation of a long-term Parklet program after the temporary program expiration date of September 6th, 2021, and a discussion of community event street closures. And who's doing the staff report for this? Is it you, City Manager Goldman?
It is. I'm going to start out. I also have Kevin Gardner, Community Development Director, and Syed Martuza, Public Works Director, available. And Kevin's actually going to do part of the report, and then Syed is going to help us with questions if there are any specific to Public Works.
Great.
And I know we have a number of members of our business community on as attendees of the meeting, so I'm sure that they'll be interested in what we have to say, and we'll have comments for you all. So good evening, Mayor and Council. We're here to talk about the Parklet Program, which I would say has probably been wildly successful for the most part. Just to give a little background, you all recall that back in 2020, early in the pandemic, we initiated a whole lot of different measures to facilitate safe outdoor dining as the COVID-19 pandemic shut everything down, particularly inside. So we did temporary street closure programs for downtown Burlingame Avenue and Broadway. We installed parklets on side streets in the downtown Burlingame Avenue area. Our temporary street closure program turned a little too successful and too crowded, so we stopped that. And we converted to a parklet program. Another issue that we had was that the parklets on the side streets were 7 days a week and the street closure was 2 days a week. And so a lot of the restaurateurs on Burlingame Avenue were interested in the parklets so they could get that expanded space all the time instead of just on the weekends. So we did switch to the parklet program for all of the Burlingame Avenue downtown area. The Broadway street closure continued for a number of months as there was a really different feeling there. We didn't have complaints about large gatherings, violations of social distancing protocols. And at the time, the Broadway Business Improvement District was supportive of street closures. We eventually transitioned the Broadway street closure to the temporary parklet program. And we extended the parklet approval in all districts through Labor Day, which is September 6, 2021. So, and you all asked when we did that extension to make sure that we came back in plenty of time so that you could either extend it or give people fair notice that the parklets would be going away. So that's why we're here today, our first meeting back from break. On May 12th, the Economic Development Subcommittee, which is Vice Mayor Ortiz and Councilmember Brownrigg, discussed parklets and whether there should be a fee structure considered if the council approves continued use of the parklet program through, after September 6th. We did some research, had our economic development and housing coordinator do some research, and we discussed several different fee programs as potential models. And you can see these meeting minutes attached to your staff report from that economic development subcommittee meeting. And the members agreed that we should refer this matter to the full council prior to any additional fee research being conducted on the, if the full council was not in favor of fees, then we didn't want to spend a whole lot of staff time doing research. If the council was in favor of fees, then we wanted to get a little bit of guidance and then go back and do further research. And so I asked staff to kind of consider a decision tree. And so our first decision really is, do we want parklets to continue on a longer term basis? If that's a yes, then, what's our preferred term period? Is it until the end of the fiscal year? Is it come back and talk to us later? Is it, some other date certain? And then again, if there's a yes, and we do want to move forward with extending the use of parklets, do you want us to do some additional research on a fee structure? And then we can also talk about when we bring that back, when the fees would go into place. So do we, implement as soon as possible or delay for some period of time? On July 8th, so just last month, the Traffic Safety and Parking Commission, during their regular meeting, discussed the continuation of the Parklets program. And there is an excerpt from their unapproved meeting minutes attached. And they did some extensive deliberations and discussions, and they indicated support for charging a fee for parklets and revoking underutilized parklets. So you may recall that when we put the parklets into place, we said everybody who has a parklet has to use them at least 3 days a week. And I think most of them are probably used at least 3 days a week. I think some of them probably are not used 3 days a week. And so the Teaspoon Traffic Safety and Parking Commission said, if they're not being used, then we could take those spaces back for parking. The Teaspoon did express some concerns about the impact of loss of public parking in the downtown area. And that is for a couple of reasons. One is that more people are returning downtown. You can see the streets are a little bit more crowded with shoppers and diners as people are, getting back out of their houses, although we'll see if that changes with the Delta variant. But for right now, everything is open and people are getting out and about more. Pretty soon, we will have the closure of Lot E, which is the parking lot next to the post office as part of the development of the post office property. They're actually going to move part of the building onto Lot E so they can dig out the garage and then move the building back. It's going to be quite an interesting engineering feat, but it does lead to a strain on parking. I want to say we have about 70 spaces in that lot, but I could be making that number up right now. And then the parklets just in general reduce the overall available parking supply in both commercial districts. So they do take up, 2 to 3 spots per parklet. So that is an impact on the parking in the areas. And then again, commissioners felt that some parklets may be underutilized, especially during cooler weather. If indoor dining is still allowed, and all indications are that the county is not going to be implementing new restrictions, then people will hopefully continue to dine indoors if they feel safe doing that. And so, if the parklets aren't being used, should those parklets remain? One thing I will just interject here, I don't know if the Teaspoon discussed it at all, but for our staff to bring out the barriers, we're going to do it once. So if people want the parklets, we bring them out once. We don't bring them out, put them away, bring them out, put them away. It's a huge impact on our city staff. And so we can't say, okay, we're going to store all these barriers that we bought and rented over the winter months and then bring them back out for you. That's just not feasible. So then we did just want to point out, and you've heard it at council meetings before and probably over email, it has been a little tricky to clean and maintain our downtown sidewalks, especially those pretty pavers that we put in many years ago. There is a lot of grease and stain that are coming from the restaurants with, staff and people dropping food. That's understandable. It happens. But unlike the floor of a restaurant, which you can probably mop fairly easily, the pavers just soak in all of that grease and the stain. And so we are having some challenges cleaning them. We have staff out there working, but it's just not as spick and span as it used to be. And that is difficult. And then the parklets are just, taking up space that we would normally clean. So it just makes it a little bit inaccessible. So we have our public works staff, some of whom are on the call tonight, have been very good about reaching out to the restaurant operators and asking them to please keep their sidewalks clean and, do their part. But it has just been a challenge for us. And then one thing that came up just fairly recently, PG&E liaison let us know that there are underground utilities that may be be impacted by the parklets. So there was some concern about electricity and gas, and then we have water and sewer under the parklets. And PG&E was particularly concerned when I spoke to the representative about gas lines that may be underneath the parklets, and that if they need to access them for an emergency repair or some kind of maintenance or something, they can't get to them. And so PG&E sort of held their fire, no pun intended, while these were a temporary program, but if we decide to make them permanent, they have some concerns about it. And so, these parklets, the nice ones, are not just chairs on the street. They have been built up, to match the height of the curb, so they, people can walk across easily without any trip and fall issues. They've been, beautified. The Beautification Commission is actually going to be giving some kind of commendation to a parklet when they do their beautification awards. So people have really invested a lot and made them, many of them are quite beautiful and quite nice to sit in and dine in. And but they may be over gas lines or vaults or manholes or something else. And so that just throws a little bit of a wrench into it. If we go forward with allowing the parklets to continue on a longer term basis, we will need to revise our permits to make sure that the utility companies can access these utilities, and that may involve moving or dismantling the structures, and that that potential cost burden would need to shift to the folks who own the parklets, not, and make sure it's not on the city, as it's not our property. And so that is something that we've asked PG&E to identify exactly where there may or may not be gas conflicts. And so we're sort of in the process of figuring that all out. I'm going to ask Kevin to talk about the parklet fees because his staff did the initial research on it. And then I will probably come back and finish it off. So Kevin, if you'd like to take it away.
Thank you, City Manager Goldman and Mayor O'Brien, members of the council. We did look at some fee models, and I'll start by saying there's not a lot. Parklets are fairly new, and I think a lot of cities have implemented parklets during the pandemic, but haven't come up with real fee structures for longer term. It was really considered a sort of economic development and really kind of crisis response. So now a lot of cities are starting to look at fee structures. So we did look for what we could find, and I can give a summary of a couple. The objective would be to offset, as Lisa had mentioned, offset the lost parking revenues, and also possibly capture some of the value of the land area itself. This is valuable real estate, and it's under public ownership, so there's some value to that. So we looked at a couple of examples. The Mountain View, they invented this before it was even called parklets. They've been doing what they call sidewalk cafes for more than 20 years. And it was really pioneering at the time. They designed a whole streetscape to be able to accommodate being able to flex these parking spaces into sidewalk cafes. The fees involve an application fee of $759, an annual rent of $6 a square foot, in addition to a $1,200 per space flat fee. And there's a minimum 5-year license term, so there's intended to be a commitment. Now these numbers are most likely based off of what their meters would bring in, or whatever the kind of lost revenue is, as well as the value of the space. So I wouldn't necessarily say we would take these exact numbers. It's more the methodology that you're looking at, trying to capture both the revenues that would have been accumulated by the meters, as well as the value of the space. And they do have a permit renewal of $200 as well. We also looked at a Parklet program in Los Gatos, and this came to our attention through the Economic Development Subcommittee meeting. One of the participants had seen it and really liked what they saw. This one's really focused more on implementation. It has a lot of kind of incentives to get the construction of parklets going. So from that perspective, it may be a little less applicable. What was interesting is they had pre-approved design guidelines and a flat fee for applicants to work with an engineer, so that the soft cost would be lower. They would charge $3,900 for engineering and design, which is certainly less than if somebody were to go out and start from scratch with doing a design. They have an application processing, which is really a fee recovery of $1,000, and then the issuance of a building permit for $1,700. The building permit is worth noting in that the existing parklets here in Burlingame, our building division staff did look at them to make sure that they were safe, but they have not been reviewed for full building code compliance. So should this be a longer term program, we would want to make sure that perhaps there needs to be a building inspection of the parklets to make sure there aren't some code issues that we hadn't noticed. And then the last example is really new. It just came up in the last couple of weeks in the city of South San Francisco. They've agreed on initially just to extend the parklets as a long-term program and have a $500 fee, which is renewed annually. I'm guessing that is meant to be kept fairly low in order to be an incentive and also support businesses, but also capture some of the costs and the value of the parklets. And then finally, there are the encroachment permit fees. So that is something that has not been collected during the temporary program, but that could be collected and further restore revenue from the lost parking spaces. And then what I think our thought is that once encroachment permit fees are starting to be assessed, some of the businesses that maybe aren't fully utilizing the parklets may decide to let them go. So it would really kind of solidify commitment from those businesses that do want to keep it for the longer term.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm just going to finish out the staff report talking about street closures, which is a kind of an adjunct to this report. And this came up again in the Economic Development Subcommittee. We discussed it at our July meeting, July 14th. Subcommittee members were interested in revisiting street closures because they were wildly successful at the time, too successful. But it did show all those people who really enjoyed coming down to Burlingame Avenue and Broadway. And so we had a fairly good conversation about it. The thought this time around would be not for permanent street closures, not closing every single weekend or all summer or whatnot, but perhaps for letting them serve as community events. One thing that didn't work so well for us last time when we closed Burlingame Avenue, we also closed the cross streets. So we closed down Lorton and we closed down Primrose. And that created a lot of problems on those side streets with people getting to the closure. Particularly, I noticed outside Phil's at that intersection of Primrose and the Avenue, and people would kind of get stuck there, and there'd be a whole lot of like 87-point turns trying to turn around and get out of that mess. With parklets in existence now that weren't there before, that makes it even more congested. And so we would keep those cross streets open to traffic to try to ease some of that congestion and make sure people don't get stuck with the parklets and, driving too far and not being able to get out of there. And so that was something we talked about with the traffic folks to make sure that was okay. We did have representatives from the Downtown Business Improvement District and Broadway Business Improvement District. They were at the meeting. Neither bid was interested in street closures at this time. One thing that we heard from retailers last year is that the street closures were really negatively affecting their businesses. And so the D bid and the Broadway bid were representing that thought that closing the streets really makes it difficult for some businesses to get their customers to their stores, and that it just wasn't something that they were interested in right now. It may be something that would be of interest once the economy recovers and those retailers have gotten back to where they were pre-pandemic, if they can get there. But right now, the feeling from the business improvement districts is that street closures would really just not be great for their members right now. The subcommittee asked us to do a community survey because we had the business folks on the Zoom call with the Economic Development Subcommittee, but we didn't have members of the public there. Nobody wanted to get up at 8:15 in the morning and join us, apparently. So we did do a survey. It went out, it launched July 29th. It concluded last week on the 12th. And we put it out in our e-news. It was on various social media. We did send it out twice, I believe, to the Downtown Business Improvement District, to the Broadway Business Improvement District, and to the Chamber. I know that they all sent it out to their members. And so we got pretty good participation. As of August 11th, so the day we had to wrap this staff report so we could get it into the packet, we had 228 respondents. By the time the survey closed, I think we had about 30 or 35 more respondents, but it didn't really change the flavor of the responses. We do have the preliminary results in your packet. Most folks, 78.92% support street closures in some capacity. They support it more on Burlingame Avenue than anywhere else. And many respondents favored weekends only, and then special events only. So that's just food for thought for the council. There was support even with the parklets for implementing short-term street closures. It does make things a little bit trickier with the parklets there and the street closures and fire lanes and all of that. So it's something that we'd have to take a good look at if the council wanted to move forward at any time. Let's see, what else? Estimated parking loss as a result of street closures will be approximately 111 spaces on Burlingame Avenue, as opposed to right now we have 29 spaces occupied by parklets. On Broadway, it would be 74 if we close completely versus 11 occupied by parklets right now. And those number of parklet spaces could change based on whether or not the council wants to move forward with fees. So we did do some work on lost parking revenues. Let's see, there's currently 43 parklets in both districts, totaling 88 lost parking spaces. And so that's not just on Broadway and Burlingame Avenue, that's also primarily in the downtown Burlingame Avenue area. It's on side streets as well. So that's why the numbers don't match up with what I just talked about for street closures. So let's see, lost parking revenues downtown right now are estimated at $15,000 to $20,000 a month. And, you know, we do use those revenues to repave parking lots and do all sorts of other parking related things. So we are losing that money. And then lost parking revenues in the Broadway district are estimated at $3,500 to $4,000 a month. So it's a smaller impact, but nonetheless an impact to our parking fund. With that, Kevin and Syed and I are happy to answer any questions. And I know that there's some other public works staff on who can jump in if you have questions about, you know, street cleaning or any of that kind of stuff. But really the focus here is yes or no on parklets. If so, do you want to do to a date certain or punt that decision to a later date? And then some direction on fees as well would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager Goldman. For right now, let's just focus on questions to the staff, and then I will open it up to public comment and then come back for discussion. So I have a couple questions. One is, I know there has been an increased amount of cleaning necessary during this time period. Do we have any idea of how much that additional cost is?
Syed, I don't know if you know, or Mike Heathcote is on. Megan, maybe you can promote Mike to panelist in case you
Lisa,
have.
I have some information.
Oh, you do? Okay, great. Yes. Thank you.
So thanks to Mike, actually, we were anticipating this question based on the earlier feedback that I had from Mayor Keegan. We are spending roughly about approximately 20 hours a week for additional cleaning. This is beyond what we typically do. And we looked at the cleaning efforts last year and before pre-pandemic and pandemic time. So on an average basis, we are spending about 20 hours a week. Now, with regards to cost-wise, looking at the cost that we currently spend, it's about $200 to $300 per parklet per month, roughly. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Director Martusa. My other question, actually, City Manager Goldman touched upon, because I was interested in how many businesses are affected with PG&E's concern. So do you know when PG&E will get back to us on that data?
So I haven't heard, they had asked us for a map that listed, so I originally got a map that said gas conflict, potential gas conflict. I said, well, potential gas conflict is super not helpful. I need to know if it's a yes or a no. I can't do anything with this information. So they asked us to provide them with all the addresses of the different parklets. And we gave that back to them at least a week ago. I don't know, Syed, if you've seen anything come back. I have not.
The only thing I have seen is the letter from PG&E requesting agencies with parklets to take precautions and requiring conditions in parklet permits for the restaurants to be able to allow them to do the work and understand the liability associated with parklets being on top of those gas lines and electric lines, as well as to be able to allow them to move the parklets so that they can move them and do the work.
Right.
Thank you. My next question is for our city attorney. Would it be wise for us to incorporate an indemnity agreement with each business?
Yes, it would. I would recommend that if we were to, any sort of extension of the program should probably include or give some consideration to an indemnity of the city.
Okay, and then my final question for Director Gardner is, would it be feasible to maybe utilize our design review personnel that we have for planning to possibly do the design review for parklets, if that is the direction we go down futuristically?
I think, yeah, certainly anything is possible if, so for example, the two examples that we showed did have design guidelines associated with them. So there is direction on what the design should be. So if this was a longer term program, there could either be a design review process, and whether it's our on-call design review folks, or maybe we get some different, it really would depend on how we want to approach this. And then whether or not we want to provide any guidelines or more just look at it as a sort of as they come in.
Great, thank you. Colleagues, does anyone have any questions? No? Okay. So I'm going to open it up to public comment. To our city clerk, are there any emails?
Yes, we received 2 emails. The first one is from Alex Holt of Flights Restaurant. He says he's in favor of the Parklet program, see what Los Gatos has done, come up with the design criteria so they all look the same, use some of the COVID funds to support the build outs, and have a vibrant dining scene and busy downtown for years to come. And then Adrian Lee sent in pictures, and she stated, "Thank you, council members and mayor, for discussing the continuation of the business parklets in Burlingame. We discussed them at our traffic, parking, and safety commission meeting on July 8th. There was no vote or consensus reached, so I would like to share with you my personal feelings on our parklets. I've attached a few photos, which I'm hoping staff can share online with council at this time. So I'll forward them to you, council, after this meeting. Parklets were originally allowed as a solution to help our restaurants and other businesses survive the inability to serve their clients indoors safely. Our pandemic is still raging on in our country, and many people, including my family, are still uncomfortable to dine or drink indoors. Parklets have been not only the business's salvation, but many of our social lives' salvation as well. The photos I have included are an example of 2 of our many expensive, charming, and heavily utilized parklets, Stacks in Copenhagen. These cost their owners thousands to install. Additionally, their charm adds a European flavor to our downtown areas and subsequently attracts more shoppers. These 2 are similar to Broadway Grill and Roca on Broadway Avenue. Simultaneously, I've included a photo of an underutilized parklet that does not add charm or ambiance to our community. There are a handful of these around town too. Each parklet is different and the owners have invested little to a very lot of money in them. Each parklet and situation needs careful handling. I support a small fee for use of parklets only if necessary, nothing exorbitant as in this packet. I support staff writing a survey of questions, which includes the business's investment and hardship as main consideration in our fee base. If the city wanted to reduce some of the very inexpensive orange barriers and not much else parklets this winter, I would not be opposed. Also, where there is only one parking space wedged between two parklets, we may consider easing that situation as well. Please consider extending the parklets where there was ample investment, adds to our charm and ambiance of the city, and if it continues to help the merchants survive our ongoing pandemic. Oh, and there's one more. We just got one from Sixtos. Francesca states, I want to go on the record from Alana's and Sixtos that we are all in favor of parklets to continue on. We are happy to pay fees. We are going to invest in a permanent structure once there is better guidance for the build out. However, we are very much against street closures of the avenue. It's hard enough to police mask wearing, let alone bad behaviors of grown-ups, as well as young people on skateboards and bikes. The evenings were the worst. There was never enough law enforcement around to keep things safe. We have had many of our regular customers tell us they chose not to come down on those weekend closures. We thank you for addressing this and thank our neighbors for allowing us to put tables and parklets in front of them. And that's it.
Great, thank you very much, Megan. All right, I will open it up for public comment, and let's start with Jennifer Pfaff.
Yeah, I kind of concur with the chats that came in, and just wanted to add that I feel as if the parklets have completely, I mean, pandemic aside and all the hardships and everything, I understand these were absolutely necessary, but in addition, seeing this evolution over time from the very simple bumper type to really elaborate, beautiful work done on many of them, I feel like it's added a completely new dimension to our downtown districts. And also, I can only assume this is added income. So it's really bad, of course, that it's, we take a hit with the loss of parking revenue. I get it, but there must be, I think it must be somehow offset by the more people coming and the attraction, because it's really kind of cool to come just look at that. So just wanted to add, it's not a complete loss on the income level, income issue. Thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment? I know there's a lot of people on this call. John Kavranian, please.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. The parklet situation is a difficult decision to make. You have 8 parklets on Broadway, and the restaurants want to keep it, and the non-food service businesses and the retailers don't want the parklets. They're saying these were installed during the emergency time during COVID. It's time to go back to regular business. But I feel for the restaurants that have spent $15,000, $20,000 building these parklets. And I believe these parklets that are nice and beautiful should stay. But the parklets that are just the orange barricades, we may have to look at to see how we can help the businesses improve them, or else it looks like a war zone with just orange barricades. Customers are complaining about parking. We have merchants that want it. We have merchants that don't. It's a tough decision to make. I, as a retailer, I feel for the restaurants that have spent a fortune building these parklets, and I think they should stay. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Jason Cooper.
Hi, as a business owner in downtown Burlingame, we built out our parklet. We spent upwards of $12,000-15,000 doing it. It's been our lifeline. It has been really for a long time, it was the only way to continue to serve our customers. And the most recent sort of events and everything going on, as of last week, nobody even wanted to come inside anymore. We've just consolidated everything outside for the time being. It's definitely not the time to pull the Parklet program, and I feel for the city and the loss of revenue. I guess I would have the question of, is the projection of loss of revenue based on just the number of spaces that are being taken up, or is it a real loss that is noticeable and you can see it on the books? Because I don't feel like, if people can't park in those spaces, it's not like they're not parking somewhere else. They're not sort of abandoning their trip to downtown Burlingame because there's 88 parking spaces taken up by the parklets. So I would definitely encourage the council to extend, and if there is a small fee involved, so be it. But please realize that the parklets are, even now, especially now in the Delta variant time, really a lifeline. Thanks.
Thank you, Jason. Is there anyone else? DZP3. I'm not sure who that is, but if you want to speak, unmute yourself.
Okay, good. Hi, I am one of the owners of Broadway Grill. We are on Broadway, actually on Cappuccino Avenue, Parklet. And my question also would be, in regards to the lost revenue, also kind of echoing the previous talker, how is it possible to calculate the potential loss of people not coming at all to those restaurants if the outside parklet seating wasn't available? Because that's something that it cannot be calculated monetarily, but a lot of people right now with families who are afraid of Delta variants probably would not even come if the parklets were not available. So that would be a complete revenue loss for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Neil Vilches. You want to mute yourself?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. So good evening. So I am a business sandwiched in between two parklets, and knowingly so, I agreed to that early on. I guess my observation, mostly not a complaint, is just to your point earlier in the wear on the cobblestone, the greasiness, the stains. And in particular, I have one parking spot in between the parklets that is really just in bad shape. I think because a street cleaning truck can't fit. And I don't know that we have a way that we're cleaning it other than, sweeping, etc. So that is, from my perspective, looking out the window, an eyesore. As I know it is, within the parklets on the cobblestone. So I'm just wondering, if we continue, what is it that we can possibly do to help the support? Because I absolutely want to support the neighboring restaurants, as I have been, but I also I find myself outside sweeping on a daily basis now with just litter and debris, things that I feel like the city really was helpful with before, whether it be gum or just spills. And I just really felt like Burlingame was extremely clean in comparison to neighbor cities before, with the cleanliness on the sidewalks and very inviting. And I feel like now we are not a standout as much. So I just like to I guess, see us reach that same level if we do continue.
Thank you very much for your comment. Anyone else? Okay, if not, I'm going to close the public comment session and go back to my colleagues. One comment actually just from our last speaker. I do agree with her that we really need to be on top of the cleaning. It does make it much difficult for the city, and that's why, you know, I asked, you know, how much the cost is, because I want to make sure, you know, if we're spending, you know, extra hours to make sure things are cleaned, and we should, that is incorporated into the lost revenue. And it may be actually, and I probably should have mentioned this, I don't know what business Miss Vilches represents, but if there's a way, maybe she can email the city, so at least we know her address, that if there's cleaning that needs to be done, that we can have staff go out there. All right, I will now call on my colleagues for comments. Let's start with Vice Mayor Ortiz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We've been talking about this for a while at the Economic Development Subcommittee. It's not an easy topic, but when it comes to the question about permanent parklets, I'm definitely in favor of keeping the program. But I've had concerns about parklets not being used and taking up parking spaces from the get-go. And so I just want to make sure that when we put this program together, we're mindful of that, and that we make sure that only the ones that are being used, and I don't mean just a few tables and a few people once in a while, I mean really used, are the ones that remain. I have concerns. There is a concern of the loss of revenue for the city. I see some of these restaurants that have tripled their capacity using city land. So they're basically profiting from city property. And I think that we need to be careful with that and make sure that if that is the case, that we are getting a share of the rent for that space that's being used. And then I remain concerned about the parking for non-restaurants in the areas. I did get a one particular concern that was interesting about somebody who could not get to their salon. And I think that's just one that we heard. So as far as the permanent program, yes, absolutely. As far as the cost, yes, absolutely. And I do like the Los Gatos model. As far as when this should be implemented, I think we need to allow the restaurants enough time to digest the pricing structure that we come up with and assess their viability and make sure it makes sense for them. I suspect that for a number of these restaurants is going to be incredibly profitable to be out on the street. And so they will continue to do it. I really like the term sidewalk cafe instead of parklets. It sounds so much nicer. So I think we should talk about that. Love the idea of the pre-approved design guidelines, although I don't suspect that we'll be adding a lot of parklets. But I think that there's a few that probably need a little design guidance, if I can say. And it would be nice to have a little more consistency through the street so that they all kind of look the same, so it doesn't look too crazy. But again, I do have concerns with Lot E going offline. So I want to make sure that the pricing encourages the use of only the ones that are really used, and the people who don't use them will feel that they're not worth paying for. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Coulson.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So I will support the extension of the parklets, and I think the big question is going to be how long. And one suggestion I might make would be to extend for a year. Do 1 year extensions, just so that people know for a year what they've got, but it gives us the flexibility to make changes in the event that those changes are required. And to the Vice Mayor's point, I agree. I think right now we require people to use them 3 days. I think we should consider maybe asking for 4 days, because I do think it's frustrating when people see that they're only being used maybe 15 hours a week, and then the other, hundreds of hours a week of time they're being used for storage of chairs, and that's not, I don't like to see that, where people are putting their chairs and their tables and their umbrellas out there, and it's just looks like a storage bin in the front. So I think you need to store your things off in your business, you need to clean them up and build them up, and then I think I would encourage people to say, if you're not going to use them at least 4 days, then you probably don't need a parklet. Secondly, the streets are very dirty. I see it in the mornings because I walk to work, and I can see a little more clearly because there's no pedestrian traffic on the street. And I will say that I have noticed a significant increase in just the amount of paper, trash, dirt, spills. And I really appreciate that our staff is working 20 hours more, but I think we probably need to be allocating double that at least. So it's really starting to get a problem, and the issue is becoming that it's almost like damaging the street now, so where it's a permanent problem if we can't get the grease up and the stains and things up right away. It seems like the only solution is replacement, which is really expensive. I would support some sort of permitting guidelines or design review. I'd really leave that up to the staff to figure out something that would be easy to manage. And my main concerns there are things like safety and ADA. I'm less worried about telling people they have to have flowers or whatever, but safety and ADA are really important. I would support a fee to cover the cleaning and replenish the lost parking revenue. Frankly, talking to not all, but many of the business owners or the restaurant owners, the parklets are in some cases allowing them to actually generate more revenue than they ever generated when they just had a closed indoor space. So even that, they're paying rent, they're getting their parklets. Some of the restaurants who are really taking advantage of this are actually doing very well, in fact, better than pre-COVID. Not all, but some. And talking to most of the restaurants, they are very willing to do this to keep the cleanliness up and to help pay for the services like policing and things like that. I appreciate that the mayor brought up the indemnification. I do think, especially as we see these ADA lawsuits and things going on, I think we have to ask for indemnification on that. And I'm not really too worried about the lost parking spaces. One of the things that I've seen happening is I think more and more people are walking or biking to downtown because they know it's a little harder to park. And I think that's encouraging behavior that we want to support. And so if anything, thinking about where maybe a convenient place for people to park bikes or for people to, putting out more messaging around, in the summer days, in the fall when the weather's nice, taking advantage of walking downtown or Ubering, especially if people are drinking, it makes a lot more sense than driving. So I will support this and look forward to crafting a solution.
Thank you, Councilmember Coulson. Councilmember Beach, followed by Councilmember Brownrigg.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Actually, my comments really concur a lot with Councilmember Coulson, so I'll try not to repeat the same things, but I do support extending. I am less, I really think we need to get in a post-pandemic world before we commit to a totally permanent program, because I think we should give people enough long-range time to plan, whether it's a year or even 2. But I think we ultimately need to get in a post-pandemic world to reevaluate and see, we might need that space, as Councilmember Coulson mentioned, maybe for bike parking, maybe for drop zones or more green infrastructure or whatever need we can't foresee. I do think we should have some reasonable fees, and I would defer to staff in conjunction with working with the business communities about when the right rollout is. But It's very valuable real estate, as Councilmember Colson mentioned. It's helping businesses expand their revenues, and not every business takes advantage of that. Retail doesn't get that opportunity necessarily the same way the restaurants do. And so I think a reasonable fee is fine. I think we should recover costs for cleaning and for parking as well, because our city we've been leaning in for 18 months, taking no revenue and taking a loss. We have a lot of expenses that are maybe invisible to members of the public, to just keep things clean and keep things paved. So I think it's very important that we, after 18 months or so, or 2 years, we need to recoup some of that. I do favor design guidelines, but I'm reluctant to put it through if we can avoid a formal design review process with the Planning Commission. I would hope it could be staff driven, because that time with Planning Commission is so valuable, and they are backlogged as it is. I don't think that's a great use of time to have big debates on what a parklet looks like as far as decoration. Support indemnification for sure. And where I had a couple, I do support, actually, I kind of like the Mountain View model. It's a little bit cleaner. I feel like the Los Gatos model focuses a lot on construction, and most of those models are, most parklets are already there. So I kind of like, I don't know what the numbers are, what the reasonable numbers are, but I kind of like the Mountain View model. And I do think, to address, we don't want people just holding a parklet and not using it. I think if we price it appropriately, use economics to drive the economic decision, and the businesses will say, you know what, this is still really valuable to me, without being exorbitant, but it's still really valuable to me. The market will decide who really needs a parklet and who doesn't. So those are sort of my thoughts. I will hold off in sharing any thoughts on street closures, because I feel like nobody else has weighed in on that yet. So we'll get through parklets, and then I'm happy if we go around the circle again as far as street closures. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Councilmember Brownrick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I join the consensus. I think we should extend the program. Like Councilwoman Beach, though, I'm not ready to make them permanent. I think we invested $16 million some years ago to have bigger sidewalks, precisely so restaurants could have space out in front of the restaurant. And while I completely agree with Mr. Cooper, I think that with Delta and who knows about Epsilon, we need to continue to have this as a safety valve for our restaurants. I'm not sure that I think in an environment, God willing, that coronavirus is not a threat, whether we should continue as a matter of public policy to allow public land to be used for private profit. So that is not a debate we need to have now. But I would not support making this a permanent program, because I'm not sure that I think in the long run, it's the right public policy. I do think the key issue, which we've danced around a little bit, is the fee structure. And I'm not sure I've seen a number or heard a number that I can get behind yet. I won't bother agreeing with all of the various procedural matters, which I think were well said by each of my colleagues. But the dollar figure, I think, is important, because I think, as Councilwoman Beach says, that's what's going to help a restaurant that's dithering and not really using the land, but it's cheap or free, and therefore why not, go from that decision to either advertising it and making it robust or putting it away. And so I guess I finished with a question on parklets for staff, and that is, what would you propose we do by way of a fee structure? How do we decide that? Is that something that comes back to us? How do you want to proceed on that?
If I may answer that, Mayor. So as I was giving my staff report, I talked about us wanting to do a little bit more research. So our decision today was, yes, you're interested in something maybe, or no, you don't care at all. You don't want it. So it sounds like we have at least 4 people, and likely 5, who are, yes, we should have some kind of a fee. So now our job is to go back and do a little bit more research and see if we can nail down any kind of estimates about, if we had a fee that covered, helped cover additional cleaning that we need to do, and helped cover some of that lost parking revenue, but wasn't, $20 grand a year or something exorbitant, like, can we dial in what that looks like?
If I could turn this into a brief conversation as opposed to the more procedural way we do things. So at least for me, and I'd be very curious for, a quick round the horn. I do think we should try to cover the cleaning costs, because I don't think we should have to clean up after profit-making businesses, or at least I hope they're making profit. But anyway, they're for profit. On the other hand, lost parking revenue, I personally fall more in the camp of the merchants who pointed out that people are still parking. They may just not be parking there. And I certainly have noticed a lot of open parking whenever I've been downtown. So we haven't gone back to the boom days of it being hard to find a parking place. So as we think about fee structures, I am less concerned about replacing parking revenue, but I am concerned about people bearing the costs of their business. So that would be my philosophy as we come up with a fee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Brownrigg. I just want to make a few comments and somewhat similar to my colleagues. I am actually for an extension of the parklets. I am not inclined to make them permanent at this point, but at least if we can extend it for another year and then reevaluate. We are coming into fall, winter. We don't know how these variants will weather through this. And whether we see an improvement or not. So there's a lot of still unknowns. And so I would at least do a year and then review again. I do think there needs to be some type of consistent design review guidelines. It could be something relatively simple, not complicated. I agree. I was not wanting this to go in front of the Planning Commission, but if our staff is overburdened, that's why I asked if the design review people that we have on call can look at them and do an over account or, approval, or if our staff feels they can do it, that's fine too. But I do want to make it, streamlined and easy to go through the process. I do want to see an indemnity agreement with each business. I do like the idea Councilmember Coulson mentioned in regards to usage of 4 days. I think that at least then it makes sure in our minds that the businesses are serious about it and that we're not using up parking spaces if we don't need to. I do think we have to cover the cleaning fees, or the businesses need to cover the cleaning fees. We have spent a lot of money revamping our downtown, and so I don't want to see that ruined. In regard to covering the parking, I'm actually relatively flexible about that. At least when I've gone down to the downtown areas, both in afternoon and evening, I've been able to find parking. May have to park a little farther. I see that there are openings, especially on the corner of El Camino and Burlingame Avenue, and also the Ralston parking lot. I do think they should be paying an encroachment permit fee because they're getting extra square footage. So how staff wants to calculate that, I leave it into their hands on what they think is reasonable fees for cleaning and encroachment permits. And we do have to remember, the city has been very open to helping the businesses, the past 18 months. But I do think now that, the times that I've gone down in the evening time, it's pretty crowded at many of these restaurants. So I think that there's an upswing in their businesses, which is what we want to see. But I do think it now becomes their responsibility and accountability moving forward, because we do have to remember the city is losing a lot of revenue, especially through our TOT. So we have to keep that in mind. Okay, I know we have focused on the parklets and not the closure of the streets, but I kind of want to wind down the conversation for the parklets and get some consensus. And then we can move on to potential street closures. So there has been a lot of direction. I think there has been quite a bit of consistency But maybe to our city manager, do you think you have clear direction? Are there questions you may have that you need more feedback from us?
So if I could maybe say what I think I've heard enough consistency from. So we're going to extend the parklets for 1 year with a review. So basically next August, we'll come back with a similar conversation, or perhaps we'll do it before the recess if we can. So 1 year extension. You are interested, everybody's interested in indemnification language to deal with the PG&E issue. And I hope my colleagues are taking notes since I'm using my fingers to give all the points here. You are all interested in some kind of fee that would cover the cost of cleaning, and whether it covers anything else or not, we'll have to look at like what the cost of cleaning means, and then, you know, kind of titrate that and see if we can get a good fee structure in place. Let's see, what else did I have? You all want to make sure that we are doing as much cleaning as we can because it's looking a little yucky out there. It's a technical term. I think I had good consensus about making sure the parklets are used 4 days a week, but maybe folks can tell me if they want to stick with 3. And then the design guidelines, the little part for me that's a little difficult, you know, design guidelines often are, we're going to do a new project and here's where those designs come in. But what do you want to do if somebody has already built out their parklet? You know, how do we impose them after the fact? And is that what you want? So maybe that's an area that I would love to get a little bit more direction on. And if any of my colleagues, Michael or Kevin or Syed, had anything else they caught that I didn't, please let me know.
Thank you, City Manager Goldman. I think you summarized it pretty well. It does sound like we need a little bit more direction regarding design review. So let's start with Councilmember Beach, followed by Vice Mayor Ortiz.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I just had one sort of related comment. What would I think might be helpful for the next conversation when considering whether or not to try to offset some of the parking fees. We don't need it tonight but it would be helpful to know, like, what are all the things we use the parking fees for? I think that would be a helpful piece of information for us to understand what that pot of money is getting invested in before we kind of decide whether or not to recoup some of those. As far as the design guidelines, whether related to existing versus future, I'm interested to hear what colleagues say on this. I haven't put a ton of thought into it, so I'm going to pass until others speak first. Thanks.
Vice Mayor Ortiz, followed by Councilmember Coulson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm intrigued by something the Community Development Director Gardner said, that was a pre-approved design guidelines. It's not that they have to come in and apply every time. We have something that's pre-approved for them to follow. And if they're in violation, then we could take action, but it's not. So that's what I would like to see.
I'm still not sure, you know, if we have those pre-approved guidelines. I don't think someone made the comment, I don't recall who, that we're not going to get a whole lot of new applications. So, you know, do you want us to go back to people who have already invested some sum of money, and maybe it's, you know, a couple $100 and they just put some chairs and tables out, and maybe it's a whole lot of money, and say, now we have these guidelines, you have to follow them? That's where I'm just struggling a little bit.
My thought on that is yes, we would ask those people to meet the guidelines that everybody else is meeting, just to be fair.
Thank you.
Councilmember Coulson.
Thank you. So one suggestion I have is, so with regard to guidelines, I think for me, the basic things are safety, ADA, but also I don't think, I do like when people cover the orange barriers. I agree with Mr. Kavranian's comment that when the orange barriers are just sort of scattered about, that they do look a little apocalyptic. They're just not, you know, they're not as tidy, and you can just see the difference between, say, you know, Stella, Park Howard, Grapevine, Cafe Central, and, you know, someone who's just like the Five Guys who just has theirs sort of cast out there. So to me, the guidelines are more about beautification and consistency. And then with regard to the ones that are already there, in addition to safety, I think, if we can grandfather some of the ones in, or, work with the ones that are there to make sure that, again, there's not a trip and hazard problem or an electrical issue, PG&E can access. And then, basically, I think a lot of people use their money that they got, their $10,000 grants, to build and beautify their parklets. So, which, by the way, I do like the name, whatever they are, the cafe thing. Parklet kills me every time I write it. My spell check fixes it about 1,000 times, and it drives me crazy. So anyway, that's kind of my basics. To me, it's more about some sort of consistency of standards. You might want to also think about like the coverings, as well as, some people are using umbrellas, and on windy days, umbrellas can get lifted and be dangerous and hit cars. So just some basics like that would be what I would be interested in.
Councilmember Browning.
Thank you. I think I concur with the prior two remarks. I guess I'm trying to avoid this becoming overly prescriptive. I don't actually think that we should go back and make somebody change something. I think that's a little bit hard. I do think if we come up with a reasonable fee, we're going to find that the people who want them to look nice are happy to pay the fee, and the people who don't want to pay the fee are probably the ones who haven't invested very much in the first place. And I think some of the orange only barriers may wind up going away once we have a fee. So I'm more inclined to be less prescriptive, but I would be comfortable letting staff come up with a set of guidelines. For example, you should not be able to see the orange barriers in any meaningful way. And I would definitely trust a staff-driven approval process to keep it simple.
Thank you, Councilmember Brownrigg. I would actually agree with that. Safety is the priority. Health and safety is priority. So whatever staff thinks needs to be implemented, I trust their judgment on that. For me, for design review guidelines, we have plenty of good examples. The one thing that does bother me is just the plain orange barricades. So they would, if they decide, to, with the fees, move forward, they do need to change. That those designs have to be enhanced, and whether that's just covering the orange barricades, that might be sufficient, but I would leave it to staff to come up with relatively easy to follow design guidelines. And like I said, there's plenty of examples that have been seen on Burlingame Avenue and some of the side streets, and also Broadway. So is that enough direction, Manager Goldman?
So I'm going to say that for our guidelines, health and safety are the top priority. So want to make sure there's ADA access and, no heaters that are going to catch a roof on fire and all that kind of jazz. And anything else that building notices. And then we want them to cover up the orange barricades at a minimum. And then if there are things that may fly, like umbrellas flying and hitting people in a windy day, that's a no-no. And maybe we'll just include some pictures of nicer parklets with the guidelines and say these are good examples. But we aren't going to, aside from making people cover up the orange barricades and fix any health and safety issues, we aren't going to make them go invest a ton of money if they've already built out a parklet. Does that sound okay?
Good. Everyone else okay with that?
Just as a kind of a curious point, originally we told people they weren't allowed to cover the orange barricades because we wanted to make sure that we could check if there were leaks because they're filled with water and it's a safety thing. But over time we've let that go. But some people may be operating off that old direction. And some people just didn't want to invest any money. So I think we have good direction on that. If you want to move to the street closures, I think we're ready for that.
Yes. So street closures. I personally, my comment on that is I'd rather wait. Let's just get through this next year, see how the parklets are working out, see how businesses are doing. I think, we've tried street closures before during COVID, and there was, and changed our minds on it because businesses were not happy with it. So I think initially, at least for the first year, let's just focus on parklets and then reevaluate the street closures. When I looked at those surveys, it doesn't differentiate, what the businesses, what their feedback was versus community feedback. I would have preferred to see that separate. And so that might be something, we consider. I know the surveys went out to the businesses, but I just don't know the differentiation between community members versus businesses. Colleagues, anyone else? Councilmember Brownrigg.
Madam Mayor, I agree with you that I think it's appropriate to punt as we head into the fall and winter on this. But I will say that I don't believe, I believe the reason we closed down the experiment was because it was too popular and because too many people were mixing without masks. And I think in hindsight, that was, or even at the time, that was the right decision for public safety and public health. But for the community, I think the community loved it. And I think the community response shows that the community still loves the idea of street closures. So what I would like to suggest is that moving into next spring, we review this question again as the weather's improving and maybe lean into this because, I think we've seen a lot of very positive feedback and, we always are familiar, every merchant wants there to be a, perpetual parking place in front of their store. And, I do understand that, but I also think the community has an interest here too. So, but bottom line, I think punting for now is the right decision. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Ortiz, followed by Councilmember Coulson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to agree with Councilmember Brownrigg. I wish we could do it right now, but because it was wildly popular. But I do think next year, when the weather starts to get warm, I think we should consider. We don't have to do it every single weekend. We could find, twice a month or something like that for the summer months. And I think that would be a good balance between, providing this great event that the community just absolutely loved, and then hurting our retailers. I did get lots of complaints from retailers about the street closures, and I think we need to be careful not to overdo it. So I think there is a happy medium. I think we should look at it early next year and prepare for the spring. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Coulson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm also inclined to defer this and focus on getting the parklets situation stabilized. And I'm open to, maybe 2, 4, 6 times a year, whatever, some sort of not permanent situation, but more of special occasion. One thing we could consider, once we get the town square built and up and running, I think that's going to take a lot of pressure off of, closing down the street because we'll have a very large space for community gathering and relaxing and socializing, as well as hopefully the community center. But another thing maybe we could consider, we do the farmers market on the side street. That works out really well. There's the Park Street. Maybe, there's Howard. Maybe we do more of a rotational closure of streets so that it's not always Burlingame Avenue, but maybe it's one of the side streets. And then like Wharton has such a lovely situation with all the restaurants there. They get together and promote it and do a side street and can spill out and have music. Maybe it shifts around a little. Nothing to be decided today, just sort of a thought for when we think about how to close it. It would be sort of a precursor to getting people to think about the town square as their more permanent place for street closure, if you will.
Thank you, Councilmember Coulson. Councilmember Beach.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Concur. We need to punt this. Not the right time with the pandemic and the virus, all that good stuff, and focus on the parklets. I agree with exploring it as the summer is approaching. I think we should really, I recommend that maybe the Economic Development Subcommittee or staff, we really study where these street closures have been successful. It's really interesting. There's a couple of cities that have chosen to make them permanent, and it would be interesting to understand what made them successful and why. And, you know, one of my favorite stories in talking to a council member down in San Carlos, they chose a permanent closure in a small area. But one of the reasons, one of their stories was that when they initially had this block closed, the businesses really didn't want it. The bookstore was up in arms, the coffee shop nobody wanted it. And by having a consistency, it changed. It had to have the opportunity to create new habits for the way businesses interacted with the space and create new habits for the way the community interacted with the space. And by the end of a few months, the bookstore was rolling out bookshelves and having open books in the street while people were in the coffee shop and the kids were doing story time at the bookstore, and people reimagined this public space. But that if it's, at least in their experience, if it hadn't been done consistently for a certain amount of time, you don't have the opportunity to build those habits. So I don't know if that would be our story in Burlingame, but I think it would be interesting to understand for the communities that have made it permanent, what's the most successful, and maybe could be a strategy like Councilmember Colson suggested, we rotate it. But another strategy might be maybe rather than go big, we go really small in one block and really try it there consistently for maybe either all summer or, you know, every single Saturday or Sunday, you know, also whatever it is, like maybe just rather than a full street, but a block. I don't know. Maybe a block that's really open to it because the mix of the retailers and the restaurants really love the idea, and maybe learn from there. And then if my only other thought is if we ever do street closures or if parklets evolve, I just want to put a plug in. There's many communities that are thinking about repurposing those barriers for the parklets and make impromptu, strategically placed protected bike lanes, because protected lanes are so expensive to build. But if you've got all those barriers, they could be really, really useful to make cycling safer in certain places where it makes sense. So I think it's exciting times ahead, and look forward to further discussions in the spring and before the summer. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Colson or Beach. So I think staff has gotten direction. I would like to see it delayed. I'm not against closures, but I'm more apt to see smaller closures than the whole Burlingame Avenue closed. But I do think at least gives time maybe for the Economic Development Subcommittee to talk a lot more with the merchants, maybe get a more in-depth survey sent to them with various options. So we have a better information of what may work. And so you have a few months, you know, to be able to work on that, and hopefully that's something we can implement. I do think, you know, once we get the town square opened, and I know that's a few years from now, that it will be the prime opportunity to be able to have, you know, entertainment, festivals, you know, various activities and events. So I think we're definitely on the right track there, but we will need something in the meantime. All right. So on that, we can move forward to the next item, 10B, which is the discussion of the city's campaign contribution limits for council elections. And Megan, will you be taking this one?
Yes. So good evening, council. Staff is looking tonight for some direction on whether we should amend or repeal the city's campaign contribution ordinance. So just a little background to begin with. Council adopted Ordinance 1801, the city's current campaign contribution limits, in 2007. The limits apply to council candidates, and these limits were created by staff reviewing the averages at that time of what individuals and organizations were contributing to Burlingame City Council campaigns. So under Ordinance 1801, originally individuals could give up to $500 to a candidate and organizations could give up to $1,000. These numbers are increased every even numbered year by the finance director using the consumer price index and a very convoluted equation that I don't quite understand. But it's gotten us to the point where individuals can now give $719.93. and organizations can give $1,439.87. Then more recently, in 2019, the governor signed into law AB 571, which was implemented on January 1st of this year. And what this law does is it says that if cities and counties don't have their own contribution limits, then the state contribution limit applies by default. So this law was adopted because they felt that most of the cities and counties in California didn't have their own contribution limits, and they kind of wanted to create those for everyone. So for cities that don't have their own, the state's default limit for this upcoming election cycle is $4,900. And additionally, under AB 571, the state acts as the administrator for this program and the enforcer of these limits. So it won't be controlled by the cities or counties. They'll actually allow the FPPC, the Fair Political Practices Commission, to do all the administration. So how our program works is that the city clerk's office administers the city campaign contribution limits. So it's my responsibility to create a database of contributions to ensure that candidates do not go over limit. And if they do, what wasn't included in our original ordinance was an enforcement section. So what we end up applying is the general provisions of the municipal code when there's a violation. So if someone goes over the limit on the first day, they'll get a $100 fine if they don't resolve it. And then that fine increases every day thereafter until they've resolved the issue. The administration of this program takes considerable time during an election year. As you all know, candidates routinely hand in statements that have, 15 to 20 pages of contributions on them. So I need to create a database of all of those. And then as we get closer to the election, there's an increasing frequency with which candidates must hand in these statements to me. So I looked into what the other cities in our county have done, and there's a chart included in the staff report. I have to apologize to Hillsborough because I apparently left them off of our chart, so my apologies. But if we include them, 14 of the cities here in the county don't have limits and instead use the state default program, and 5 have their own limits set. I'll note that one of them that has a limit set is San Mateo. And in talking to the city clerk, they are interested in changing their contribution limits. However, because they are a charter city, that would require a ballot measure. So at this point, staff is recommending that the council consider 2 options: either repeal the city's campaign contribution ordinance so that the state's default limit applies, as this would save considerable staff time and create separation between the city and the enforcement of these contribution limits. Or we need to amend the city's ordinance, and I've included a series of questions that, if that is your choice, that I would like you to go through and answer so that we can bring back an ordinance. And that's it.
Thank you, Megan. Does anyone have questions of Megan? Okay, if not, then.
I think Councilmember Beach has a question.
Oh, sorry. Just saw that pop up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It was a late hand. To our city clerk, I'm just processing this, and it just sort of occurred to me. It was very informative. I was shocked to see so many cities don't have campaign limits, because our culture here in Burlingame, we have them. And are any of these cities that you talk to who are currently under AB 571 is sort of the new legislation that's sort of surfacing and like throwing a limit out there in the $4,900 range? Do you sense that it's spurring conversations to set limits? Or is the culture just like, hey, they used to get $10,000, so now there's a limit, so they're not going to reduce it further? Wow.
So most, if not all of them, didn't have limits to begin with. And
Right.
when they brought it to council for discussion, it was determined that they should just continue to allow the state to do this
to
route.
manage it.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, through the city attorney, do I open this up to public comment? correct?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so Megan, did we get any emails?
No, we did not.
Okay, so now I'm opening it up to public comment. Does anyone want to comment on item 10B? Okay, if not, I will go back to my colleagues. Who would like to start? Councilmember Brownwick.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'll try to be quick. I don't support following the state rules. I think those are absurdly high for any election, especially district elections in the future. This number would swamp and basically make meaningless any donation limits. So I do support maintaining our own limits. I certainly support making it easier for staff, so not based on CPI, but whether it's $50 every cycle that it goes up. And I'm happy to treat individuals and corporations the same, even though in principle, I detest treating corporations as people. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Ortiz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to agree with just about everything Councilmember Brownrick said, including the treating corporations as people. But instead of maybe the increase of $50 a year, maybe we could just set a limit right now, or set a limit when this comes back. And then we can review it on whenever we feel like it needs to be reviewed. I think ours are, I've always felt that they're fine. I never felt that it limited my ability to raise funds. I think it limits people's influence in the process. And especially like Councilmember Brown said, if we go to district elections, it's gonna be even more so. So I wish I could take that burden off of you, Megan, but sorry. It just seems a little too high. Thank you.
Councilmember Coulson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I actually don't have a problem going with the state guidelines, mainly because, first of all, it's what predominantly most of the other cities are doing, and they're all going to districted elections as well. And, you know, I think it's really up to the candidates to say, hey, I'm not going to take a check over $500, or I'm not going to take a check over $1,000. You know, if somebody has two people who want to finance their campaign and gets two $4,900 checks, well, everybody can look transparently at the records. They can see who those people were. You know, this is all transparent. It's all out there. The data is out there. And, you know, candidates themselves can just commit and say, you know, I'm not going to take a check more than $500 from anybody, or I'm, you know, whatever. And they can put their own personal limits, like I'm going to fundraise through small dollar limits. So that can be done without the government having to step in and overlay our, you know, scenarios on it. So I guess I'm a little more, you know, I don't think these district elections are going to cost very much. They're probably going to be, you know, $15,000 to at the most $20,000, $25,000 is what I'm guessing people are going to have to raise. And how people choose to raise that is transparent. It's obvious. It shows through. And so, I mean, you know, I'm less worried about the individuals, but, you know, I think people over fundraise even for our elections. You know, we've had people who've raised huge amounts of money for our elections, knowing, you know, you're only going to probably spend 2025. To me, that's the probably bigger issue, but I don't know how we would solve that. Again, that's up to an individual candidate. So I personally would be supporting, I will support the city clerk moving to the state guidelines like most of the other cities do, and letting individual candidates sort out what they want to accept or not accept.
Thank you, Councilmember Coulson. Councilmember Beach.
I'm struggling with this because I'm very concerned about the staff time, the tracking, and what a very difficult task that is to try to attribute, you know, hopefully everybody has good legal counsel and is doing everything above board, but it's kind of a nightmare tracking people with different last names, families, corporations. I fully support treating individuals, the suggestion that individuals and corporations sort of are on equal footing. I think that empowers individuals to actually have more impact than corporations. So I kind of like that change. I think that's important. I feel like just having gone through elections, $4,900, particularly for district elections as a limit, feels so high. But I think Councilmember Colson's point is it's transparent, and people will know who's funding what. And if you only have 3 donors or 4 donors, well, you know, people can look that information up.
Why have a limit at all then?
What's that?
Why have a limit at all then?
Well, because the state says so, but then the state assumes responsibility and takes, right? There's no tracking that has to happen at the local level. If we set it at $3,000 or $2,200, then we have a lot of staff time. At least that's what I'm hearing the city clerk say. I don't think I fully understood. I had no idea that the city clerk's office does that until sort of, you know, the discussion in the staff report. I just thought, oh, people hand in their reports and that's it.
No, and in fact, sorry to interrupt, council member, there's a new law that requires me to have everything on our website within 72 hours. So it's really limiting my search and, you know, creation of this database within that first 72 hours, because you'll want me to catch any issues before it's put on our website for the general public to catch.
And this data isn't, the public needs to understand, this data is sort of manually presented, generally speaking, to the city clerk on a paper form. So there's these translated documents that you have to put in a database. It's not like candidates upload into a database. Maybe that's where we need to go. But I find this, yeah, this is a tough one.
Thank you, Councilmember Beach. I actually would like to simplify this a little bit more and go with what the state mandate is. I mean, we've had other not even local elections, but higher ups that have gotten huge contributions. So I think it's all transparent, and people make up their minds on who they want to vote for. And so if people feel that, you know, candidates, you know, kind of cater to certain corporations or certain individuals, then that's for them to make that decision. But I do think when this was, you know, discussed years ago, you know, I went along with it, but I did have hesitations because I think, you know, community members should be able to contribute what they'd like to contribute. And, you know, sometimes there's candidates that get a lot of, you know, volunteer work or other services, such as, let's say, design of pamphlets for basically free, because they know people that are in those industries, so they don't have to pay out that money, whereas other candidates don't have those same resources and are paying out more money. So, you know, I think the city of Burlingame candidates, you know, in general have done a very good job with really getting most of their money from community members, and anyone can look it up. And so if people have issues with it, they can voice those issues when the election comes around. But I do think it's so much easier just to follow the state mandate. Most of the cities, 14 cities are going along with that. And it does make it a little easier on our city clerk, and the numbers are really odd, you know, each election on the increases. So that's kind of where I fall on that. And, you know, as mentioned by, I think, Councilmember Colson, candidates can make those decisions for themselves, whether they may want to stay with not accepting anything over, you know, $500 from individuals and, or, you know, $1,000 from businesses, or could be lower. And, you know, good for them if they are willing to do that. Councilmember Colson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So 2 comments on that. So first of all is if people think that the city limits are too high, one way to solve that problem would be to go to Kevin Mullen and Assemblyman Mullen and Senator Becker and ask them to consider putting legislation together that stratifies out the cities or cities by size or something and puts in lower limits if we want. And then it's still the onerous stays on the state. That would be one option. And then, the second thing I have is, I guess, I'm not sure what people are worried about. This is a question for the city clerk. So when you're finished with your campaign, and this is coming from a person who does not have aspirations for higher office. This is about where I want to be, and I'm very happy at the city level. So I've explored the question or the conversation about taking my money from my city council race and moving it to a different race. And I guess, is that what, people might be concerned about that in other words, you're using your city council fundraising to raise money down the road for a future race that's for, say, county supervisor or something else. Can you take those funds, or do you have to close that campaign, donate those funds out, and start a new campaign?
I would have to talk to the FBPC, but I know AB 571 had portions of it dealt with when you transfer money into other races. I don't think they specifically address when it's going into your own race, but your own different account. But I know that you have to open a new account, so you would have to withdraw those funds. So you would have to close out your initial campaign statement or campaign account in order to create your new account for your new race. So there would have to be some sort of transfer, but that would be an FPPC question that I can ask of them.
Right. I guess that could be one of the questions or concerns that people have. But again, to me, it's sort of candidates' own business, whatever they want to do. Anyway, that's just my thoughts.
Councilmember Brownrigg, followed by Vice Mayor Ortiz.
Thank you. I have a quick answer to Councilwoman Colson, then a quick comment. So I think I know the answer to this because I think I went through this. So you cannot use council race money to invest in a run for the assembly. You have to first go back to every one of the donors and ask them if they'd like their money back. So there are pretty significant red tape in the way of porting it over. But what candidates do with large war chests is support other candidates. And that then buys favor for that candidate in the future from those candidates. And that is a phenomenon that you see happening at many levels of government. And one can debate whether it's healthy or it's unhealthy. But that's where I think an ambitious candidate would use these very large fundraising totals, would be to support other politicians and then buy their support for the future. My comment is, and I really didn't expect this to be controversial, and I try not to get on a soapbox, but if you want to get money out of politics, you have to start by limiting the money in politics. And I am really rather shocked that we believe going to $5,000 per person for a city council race in a city of 30,000 people is the right number. I understand that's the state law, so we have to have it, but it's tantamount to having no limits at all in a city like ours. And I really think money can pervert politics, and I think this is a mistake. The reason those other cities follow this is because they had no rules whatsoever. And yes, I do understand, just like Bernie Sanders, you can make a pledge to just accept small dollar figures, but that won't stop the other candidates taking very large dollar figures from lots and lots of people. And I just don't see how that's better for a fair fight in politics. So for me, I'm going to stay with, I think we ought to have our own limits, and we're better off for it. It's served us well for all these years. Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And what I keep thinking, I can't just shake it, is we raise somewhere in the neighborhood of 20,000 when we do these campaigns. And I'm thinking with a limit of 5,000, that means 4 donors can match, some of us have gone a lot higher than that, but as I say, the average is somewhere in that neighborhood. So 4 donors could match what I raised in the last 2 elections. That makes me really, really nervous.
Councilmember Coulson.
So I guess again, if we all know the other thing, if you read through the statement, talked about PACs and also small, the ability to small bundle and make fairly large donations. There are so many ways to get around the donation limits. You can put a PAC together. You can have somebody else put together a special interest committee and write you a $50,000 check or a $100,000 check. We can get around campaign limits. You know, there's lots and lots of ways that people do and will and try to get around campaign limits. I had somebody walk up to me in my campaign and hand me 20 $99 checks. And I sent them all back and said, I'm sorry, but this kind of isn't the way I do business. And, you know, I rejected them. So you can reject things, you know, when you know, I mean, we as candidates know what's right and what's wrong. And if somebody really wants to raise $50,000 or $100,000 for a city council campaign, they're going to do it off, they can do it off $100 checks and $50 checks and $250. They could do it with our current limits because people have in our council and raised over 50 easily. So, you know, I mean, I know when I was raising this last time, I just told people to stop. With 3 weeks to go, I just stopped. I told people, please, you know, don't give me checks. I had people calling, do you want to check? Do you want to check? I just said, no, I'm good. I've raised enough money. Thank you very much. That's my prerogative and my sensibility as a candidate. And people can look at my disclaimer and they can see who I've taken it from, how much I've taken from them. And, you know, if you think it's a good political campaign strategy to take, you know, 4 checks, you know, whatever, but maybe that to me could provide opportunity for newcomers, maybe people who don't know as many folks in Burlingame or want to fund their own campaign for $5,000 or, you know, have 2 or 3 friends who really want to support them and give them a few $1,000s each. And that's enough to run a campaign. Why should I stop that person from being able to, who's new and maybe doesn't know a lot of people, but bringing some interesting ideas? Why should I stop them by saying you can only raise $500 per person? I don't know. I think to me, whether we set it at 4,900 or 1,000, people who want to get around it will, and people have to be accountable to their own, you know, FPPC filings. So I'm thinking about this more from the standpoint of enforcement and staff time and just what other cities are doing and rolling us into compliance with that. Any candidate can certainly say they're unwilling to take PAC money or money from bigger donors and make that a personal statement and move along. I'm not worried about people being influential in our elections.
Okay, does anyone else want to make a comment? Because my comments aren't changing. And, you know, I think the example that was mentioned, well, if there's 4 checks for, you know, close to $5,000, you know, and didn't like that aspect, I think, you know, the public's going to look at that too and maybe come to that same, you know, conclusion. But we can look at the flip side of it, which I think Councilmember Coulson touched upon. It could be 4 friends. It could be 4 relatives. So, you know, people may look at that differently. And there are new candidates that come up, you know, and run, and they may not have the foundation of, let's say, incumbents that have been on the council for quite some time. So it's going to be harder for them to raise money when it's at $500 increments. So I just think, you know, since everything is transparent, let the public, you know, make their decisions when it comes to time to vote. So I think rather than belaboring this anymore, I can open it up. Well, before I open it up to public comment, Councilmember Beach, I just saw your hand go up.
Oh, sorry. Did we already have, if we haven't had, have we had public comment yet?
Yes, we did.
Oh, we did. I'm sorry. I guess I'm too enthralled in this conversation. I lost track.
Yeah. so I'm listening to everybody, and I think where I come down on this is the idea of a couple, right? Madam City Clerk could give $4,900 each, so it'd give basically $10,000 to a candidate from a family. Seems a little excessive for district, a lot excessive for district elections. If district elections are trying to be more accessible, folks that don't have those connections, don't have that kind of access to those kind of donors necessarily. I do think district elections are going to be tricky. I think we're going to need, because it's presidential years and gubernatorial years, they're going to need more money than would have maybe been needed in the odd years. But I do think the culture of Burlingame, I feel, even though it's additional staff time, I wish maybe there's a way we could have a rule where we have to digitally upload a document via Excel. That could be our process to make it easier on the city clerk. But I think there should be some kind of limit, perhaps higher than it is now. Maybe it's around 2,000 to account for that. And then let's reevaluate after this next go round. And if it doesn't feel like it was done well, then we can go and always default to AB 571. But once we default to that, there's going to be a lot of, it just seems extraordinarily high. So I think I fall with the Vice Mayor and Councilmember Brownrigg on setting some kind of reasonable limit. I would like not to see it go to like a cost of living where we have and 39 cents. It's got to be an even 100 of some kind or 200 of some kind or rounded up. And it does have to have an escalator because every couple years it costs more to print, it costs more to do outreach, and people up their game. And it's unfortunate, but that's the world. So I think, at least for now, I'm more comfortable with some kind of reasonable limit. And I welcome other people's, at least the two gentlemen's ideas of what that number should be.
Councilmember Coulson.
Well, I think if we're going to go that way, then that we should set a cap, which I know a lot of cities have considered or done, I believe, on total fundraising. Like we might just want to set a cap that $25,000 is what you can raise for these races. Because if you don't, when we're going to have people that I guarantee you will try to be raising $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 for these races. It's ridiculous. And so, and I understand that it's hard to transfer, but I take Councilman Brownrigg's point very well, which I personally make a pledge to never take campaign money and write a check to somebody else's campaign, because I don't know if my donor agrees with that other person. But people do it all the time. People wrote checks into my account from their bank, their own campaign accounts. So personally, I agree with Councilman Brownrigg that what happens is people fundraise, they raise a bunch of money, and then they use it to dole out favors and buy reciprocity. And so one way to sort of solve, to me, that's the bigger problem to solve. I don't really care whether a person gets, moves to Burlingame brand new and they and their husband or their next door neighbors fund their campaign for $15,000 and they run a campaign. I am more worried about people fundraising these enormous amounts of money, well more than you're going to need for a small election. So I guess I'm just curious, can we set a cap on total fundraising then? I would ask that to the city clerk.
Or maybe the city attorney.
Or the city attorney. I mean, and the reason is because that's how you're going to get fairness in politics. It's not whether somebody gets $3,000, $5,000 checks or $15,000, $1,000 checks. It's whether somebody raises 100,000 and somebody raises 10. That's when the table is not fair and equitable. And a person who's lived in Burlingame and raised their kids in Burlingame and been involved in the schools and everything else is going to have a much deeper base from which to raise funds than a new candidate, maybe younger, doesn't have kids, someone that's not as well known. So to me, the bigger issue is a gross cap on the whole thing. And I would be willing to set a gross cap to go
So I
in conjunction
know
with
that some cities and the state have set voluntary limits where they say, hey, if you spend under this amount, then we give you this benefit, which I know at the state level would be your campaign statements. in the state book. And at the city levels, the cities that I've seen have done it have said, hey, we'll put your statement on our website, which we do. So it's not really that much of an extra benefit. So I'm not technically sure if that was their way around not being able to set caps that aren't voluntary, and the city attorney and I can look into that if there's any issue with that.
Yeah, council member, I don't have the answer to that question right now. So I would need to do some research in conjunction with the city clerk and come back to you with an answer to your question, which I'm happy to do.
My recollection is the Supreme Court has made it impossible to set hard caps like that unless you offer public financing, because of the notion that money equals speech. I think you get into a free speech problem. But I would support Councilwoman Coulson's cap on campaign expenditures if there's a way to do it. But I suspect we're going to find ourselves frustrated by the Supreme Court on that.
Councilmember Beach.
I appreciate colleagues' comments on this. I'd like to point out that campaign funds can be used for other expenses like attending events and tickets and other sponsorships, and not everybody is independently wealthy. And so those funds can be useful for folks that want to participate in those events, but may not have personal means to do so. So I would not be in favor of capping that, the top amount for raising. And again, everything is transparent and people can see who's raising what and where they're spending it.
Councilmember Coulson. You need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I just have a quick question. Don't we now have like a $3,000 per person to support, and we pay for people's conferences, we generally pay for people's attendance, and we pay for, I just want to make sure people are clear that are listening in on this, that there are ways that the city does support the council to be able to attend conferences and things like that, whereby we pay for those fees. And I mean, I've never once, had to take money out of my campaign account to cover a city expense. So I think we do reimburse some of that. Is that hotel rooms and things like that?
We do have travel accounts for each member of council. I'd have to go back and look at what they are. And then whoever's serving as the mayor that year gets a higher amount.
Okay. So I just, sorry, Councilmember Beach, with all due respect, I just want people to make sure that they understand that there are funds available. So people who do run, who don't have, who aren't independently wealthy or have enough funding to pay for that can. My personal experience is that more people have used their funds to support other candidates. And I think, for example, we saw a lot of that going on in the most recent state Senate seat. So that's just my observation.
All right. So we still have kind of a wide variety of options here. I'm going to jump in. I think it's worth actually investigating the overall cap, especially too that we're moving to district elections. Elections are not going to cost as much as the general elections that we've all been involved with. So I'm wondering if we could at least have consensus to have staff go back and do a little bit more research on that. So at least we have another option, potential option we can look at. So I see a thumbs up with Vice Mayor Ortiz and Councilmember Coulson Brownrigg. So why don't we do that since we have a majority?
Though, just to save some time, can we talk about what the dollar limit would be if we move down that path? And I mean, at least for me, Madam Mayor, I think moving to 1,000 would be okay. I guess what are we at? We're at 720. So moving it to 1,000 would make sense to me. And then asking the city clerk to come up with a reasonable escalator that's in even increments. At least that way there'd be two options that come back to us and we can make a decision next time.
Well, I think if we're I was looking at an overall total cap, not necessarily a cap per individual or per business.
No, I appreciate that. And that may well be the way we go, but if it's illegal to do that, it seems to me that the earlier question was, what should the cap be if we go down that road? So just to make it simpler, if we had both options, it might make it, we might be able to make a decision next time.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt to have multiple options. I'm okay with that. Is everyone else okay with that? Okay.
Okay, so I'm sorry, are you asking?
And are you asking then for a potential cap right now? What that would be?
Well, that to me then could be part of the staff report that comes back after staff has investigated an overall campaign spending cap. And if that proves unworkable or infeasible, then we'd fall back to at least have a proposal for an individual limit. And who knows where the council goes with any of that, but at least that we have two options on the table.
Okay, so but can I ask for a little clarification? So what you're proposing is $1,000 for individuals and organizations evenly, and an escalator that would be like somewhere in the neighborhood of 4% a year, that would be $40 a year.
Well, I appreciate the granularity, Mr. Vice Mayor, but I think what the city clerk was hoping to do is not have a percentage, but have round numbers.
No, I understand. That's why I'm coming up with around $40. But the reason I didn't just pull that out of nowhere, that's kind of 4%.
So if we have campaigns every 2 years, it'd be $80, basically. That's what you're thinking?
Yeah. I'm just throwing out a number.
Yeah, again, just for specificity, makes sense to me.
Through the mayor.
Councilmember Coulson has her hand up.
Thank you. So sort of check, I appreciate looking at the cap. I think that if we can't legally impose it, what we might want to do is when we hand out candidates information is to suggest, based on experience, these campaigns can cost around $20,000 to $30,000, whatever. Just as we're doing our education session, Lisa, where we bring people in and talk about the city, maybe it would be helpful for Megan to have a little piece that says this is about what it costs to run a campaign. We can help people out that way. And then the candidates can agree to a voluntary limit if they want. Or we can, I like this idea, you get whatever you get extra, maybe the League of Women Voters says if people retain the cap or are under the cap, they can be in the I don't know, whatever, we could figure it out. There might be some good benefits, but maybe it would be helpful if there was just some guidance. And then secondly, with regard to the base, I'm okay with the 1,000. I think that's fine. And then I would probably just set like a $50 increment, but I wouldn't do it every year. I would either do 25 a year or do 50 every campaign cycle, which I think we can do every 2 years. And then just keep it at that. So the numbers are all kind of squared off and even and rounded. So when Megan's auditing or when we're auditing it, you can tell a little quicker what's going on. So those are, I could support the 1,000.
Okay, so I think there's enough direction at least to come back with those two options. We can further discuss. Councilmember Beach.
Thank you. Yeah, I would be in favor of rounding up rather than like an 80 number. It's got to be like an even 100 or an even 50. It's just much easier to manage that way. And I would just, I think one of the concerns that Councilmember Coulson brought up that I think is reasonable, like some people have connections to people who do pro bono stuff. Some people's pro bono stuff is like professional, so it has to be charged. Other people don't have those connections. Some people are committed to using union printing versus not. Some people are not. It's hard to gauge how much a campaign actually costs until the actual reports are in. And every 2 years or 4 years, costs go up. And we've never had in the city of Burlingame an election cycle during a gubernatorial race or during a presidential year. So perhaps we might want to consider, if we want to pursue the campaign limit, we wait until we maybe have suggestions. We give data points of the last, I don't know, 5-6 years of what people spent on campaigns, not what they raised, but what they spent. But we might want to wait to officially set a limit for a gubernatorial year until after we've done one, and then maybe do the same thing after the presidential year to see how much those cost and have suggestions. But I just think it's really hard to gauge how much campaigns actually cost, depending on who you know and who volunteers are, and how it just costs get escalated so much year after year. Thank you.
I do think an aspect that we did not incorporate into this, and I touched upon it a little bit earlier, is when you have people that are doing voluntary work, that does cost money. And so if you're going to put a cap on raising money per individuals and businesses, and you need to put a cap on voluntary. So it's an even playing field. Because there are candidates that may have a lot of people that have the resources that can do it voluntarily, whereas others then have to pay for it. And so if you're going to be looking at, being as equal as possible, then that needs to be incorporated in the number. And that also needs to be capped. So I'm not sure if we really gave staff the most specific direction. I think we have a few options. Considering we've kind of come up with a few different options, I think that we just incorporate the discussion into, it sounds like maybe 3 options, and then come back for further discussion.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, council.
We didn't make it easier, but at least a good, robust conversation.
Exactly.
All right, let's move on to item 10C, which is the update on the implementation of hybrid meetings for City Council, Planning Commission, and Traffic and Safety Parking Commission meetings. And I think this is also back to Megan.
It is. This one is more of I would say it's a feel-good item. So I wanted to give the council and public a brief update on what we're doing to implement hybrid meetings for City Council, Planning Commission, and Traffic Safety Parking. And we're focusing on those 3 bodies because if we all remember pre-pandemic, they were the ones that met in the council chambers, and they're also the one whose meetings were recorded and played live on television. So those are really my main focus today. So if you remember, on March 17th, the governor issued an executive order that allowed us to meet telephonically or by other means. So staff worked very quickly, and we got our Zoom meetings all set up for council and commission meetings. And it's really become an effective tool that we've all used over the past 18 months. I think there's no one in our city that hasn't used it in various ways. So by holding these meetings on Zoom, residents were able to participate in the meetings from their home and some even from their college town. And additionally, we created an email account that allowed people to email in their public comment if they couldn't attend the Zoom meeting. So as a result of all that, we've seen an increase in public participation in our meeting. It's allowed working parents who maybe can't get to our meetings because they got to get dinner on the table to participate from home. We've also found that it's easier to schedule consultants to come in and to give presentations because they no longer need to drive down and have us pay for them to sit at our meetings until it's their time to present. So it's really given us a lot of additional tools in our toolbox. On June 11th of this year, the governor issued another executive order, and he started setting dates by which we have to get back to regular business. And one of those is that you can no longer have remote meetings for local legislative bodies beginning in October. We did put an item earlier on the agenda that asked for the governor to delay this because of the rise in the Delta variant. So we'll see how that plays out. But for right now, we're aiming at having our October 4th meeting being in person at the chambers. So I think we've all heard that our community really likes the ability to participate from home. I know that all of us have enjoyed participating from meetings via our own couches and whatnot. So therefore, I started looking into how can we conduct hybrid meetings where you'd allow individuals to be in the chambers participating as in the pre-pandemic times, but also allow people to still use the Zoom link. All the city clerks, we all talked about what we're all doing, and everyone's looking into somehow creating some sort of hybrid meeting, or at the very least having that email still going on so that they can read public comments during the meeting. So in order to do this, we have to upgrade our council chambers. And so I've reached out to several audio and visual equipment companies, and they are slammed at the moment because every other city and local jurisdiction and company is also reaching out to them. I was able to meet with one who submitted a proposal, Conference Technologies, and we were very impressed with what they suggested, and that's what we're going to go with. So what they want to do, just to give everyone a preview, is we'll have a large monitor on each side of the dais, which will vastly improve what we used to do, which was a pull-down screen with a projector. We'll all be able to clearly see presentations from here on out on these two screens. What the screens will also do is it'll act like a Zoom link of itself. So it'll allow the consultant to be seen by the public if they're zooming into the meeting versus being in person. And it'll just allow public who are participating in the meeting from home for everyone who's in the chambers to be able to hear them. On top of these monitors, we're going to have cameras, which Lee will be controlling, and they'll work the same way as his cameras used to be. But what's great about them is that they act as a Zoom link of their own. And so that Zoom link will allow people at home to see the whole council as a whole at the meeting, or the staff as they're speaking, or the podium, whoever's speaking there. Additionally, we're going to have monitors that will install at all the council commissioner seats and then at the staff tables below, so that we can see the presentations more clearly, and also so that you can see who's zooming in from home. It'll allow the mayor to still call on attendees that are at home so that they can speak. You'll still get that kind of list. This won't be a monitor that you use to look at your agenda packet or anything else. It's really just there as a visual of what you're already seeing on your screen right now. And then lastly, we're going to need to do some various technology updates to the chambers to prevent an echo when we have our microphones on with the Zoom Live, and also some upgrades so that we can still funnel this all onto television so that people will be able to watch the meetings that way. So we're going to have a variety of options available. While we would love to say that this will all be put into place by October 4th, because of the shipping delays that we've all been dealing with and the demand for this equipment, it's not likely that this will be installed by then, but we'll get it up and running as soon as possible. And our former finance director was kind enough to review how we can use PEG funds. So we'll be using PEG funds for this instead of using general funds for this project. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Megan. Anyone have questions? Okay, Councilmember Coulson.
One quick question. City Manager Goldman, if we still have a indoor mask mandate, which I'm guessing we're going to have all winter, I guess that's one of the precursors for sending a letter to the governor, because to me, that's going to be the hardest thing, is if everybody has to be sitting in chambers together 6 feet apart with masks, trying to communicate and talk will be a little bit difficult. But I would assume if there's an indoor mask mandate, we will be indoors and council chambers wearing our masks.
You assume correctly. And there is absolutely no way that I can keep everybody 6 feet apart. Our chambers don't allow for that. We're squished in there. So all you nice council members will be breathing all over those of us sitting below you, below the dais. Hopefully we all have good masks to protect us, because it is not pretty. And that is why Mayor O'Brien asked me to draft the letter that you approved on consent today, asking Assemblymember Mullen and Senator Becker to talk to the governor and say, this is ridiculous. We can't go back to in-person meetings, we need to have an option to not do that, because with Delta and Mass, it's just going to be really difficult.
Right, if there are no further questions, I'm going to open it up to public comment first. Megan, any emails?
No emails.
Okay. I will open up the public comment section. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment on this item number? Okay, if doesn't look like it, so I'm going to go back to my colleagues. What would you like to do?
This is just for information, so.
I mean, I thought it was a terrific report, Madam Mayor, and kudos to staff and Megan for making this happen. And I was asked over the weekend by somebody in the state legislature, are you guys thinking about keeping it hybrid? And I said, absolutely, we are. I just wish I had read the report before I answered. If I could have just given him a copy. So, I tip my hat. This is well done, Megan.
Thank you.
I would like to add the same kudos, Megan. As we have seen, the last 18 months, my opinion, we have definitely seen an increase in participation. And so it will be nice to be able to move forward and incorporate that option. I think it's great, for, let's say, older adults that don't like driving in the evening. I think it's good for families that may have young children and it's a little more difficult to leave the family to go to a meeting. So this is another option that they can at least, stay at home and wait for their interested, agenda item or watch the whole meeting. So it's just an additional option that I think really engages increased civic involvement. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to our city clerk. That was a great report. And I just want to say, every time we go to Hillsborough for the fire board meetings, I come back to our chambers feeling very, very neglected. They have a technology, they have a screen at every chair. And so I think we're in dire need of some upgrades. And I think that hopefully this is a good beginning. But so thank you. I'm very much in support of this. Thank you.
Councilmember Coulson.
In thinking about all this and how we go back, I personally don't ever want to see that ginormous binder show up on my doorstep again. I know the mayor loves hers, but and she probably prints them all out, I'm guessing. And maybe when you're mayor and you're running a meeting, it's very helpful to maybe have a hard copy. But personally, I've been able to use my 2 screens. So I just want to make sure that to think about how we're going to handle the paper and the reduction. It was huge cost savings, big environmental benefit, smaller footprint from the council. So for those of us who are happy to, use our devices, is there a way that we can think about, how we would be able to at least use our computer or our pad to pull our notes up and, work off those as opposed to our, binders of paper that we then have to recycle and create lots of carbon waste.
We began this discussion before with the city attorney, Kathleen Kane, had brought it up about creating a policy and maybe doing iPads up at the dais. So one of the things I was also going to look into was putting in more outlets so that we can make it more accessible for you guys to do things like that, and maybe in the future offer, iPads just expressly for that. But I want those monitors to stay there because they'll be used by the commissioners and everyone else. They're really just going to be kind of like a visual tool for all of you.
Thank you. I think that would be fantastic if we could have, so everybody has equal tech. It's not about money and what you can afford, a better iPad or not, and would give everyone equal access. If you wanted paper, you can get your paper, but if you're willing to decline it, then at least we would have a standard, and then we wouldn't have to be hauling our iPads back and forth and crashing them and breaking them. And you can deal with all the security issues as well. That sounds great. Thank you.
I think we can put that as a future agenda item and not discuss this any further because it's not on the agenda. All right, any other comments on this item number? Okay. Moving along, council committee and activity reports. Does anyone want to add anything? Okay, future agenda items. We kind of actually just put one on if everyone's okay in regards to the potential use of iPads futuristically. Okay. Next we have acknowledgements, and I would like to acknowledge two people this evening, and I'd like to start out with the recent passing of five-time Mayor Rosalie O'Mahony, who passed away this past Saturday. I just wanted to mention, say a few words. So in 1965, Rosalie O'Mahony moved to Burlingame and called it her home. She was born in Ireland and lived in the Irish Republic, the Netherlands, and Germany, in addition to Oregon, before she moved to Burlingame. She started teaching in the math department in 1965 at CSM and taught thousands of students over the years. I think Vice Mayor Ortiz was one of her students. In 1986, she was appointed to the Beautification Commission, which paved the way to her political life in Burlingame. In 1989, the voters elected her to her first term as a council member, and she spent 20 years on the council, was a 5-time mayor and a 4-time vice mayor. I would always refer her to as the queen of infrastructure, and she would rather balance finances and fix sewers than make headlines. Her career in many ways has been defined by her civic service. She was very well respected by every council member she worked with, and also by her Burlingame staff. She was never afraid to speak her mind, and she always made her decisions based on principle. Even after she dedicated 20 years of service on the council, she continued to be involved with the Storm Drain Oversight Committee and the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency. Her accomplishments were numerous. She will definitely be missed. And the city of Burlingame was very, very lucky to benefit from her dedication, her intelligence, and her overall love for people. In regards to her funeral services, I will have a confirmed information tomorrow. And once I have that, I will send it to the city manager. The second acknowledgement is Anastasia Cole, who passed away on June 22nd. She was a real fixture here in Burlingame, in particular with the Burlingame Rec Center. She taught art and was quite skilled and enthusiastic. She shared her father's love of the arts and expressed her artistic talents through many media. She also actually moved to Burlingame in 1965, and she taught many art classes and even an art program that was built around her talents. As an art teacher, she inspired creativity in students, young and old. She had an uncanny talent for relating to people of all ages, connecting with them artistically and socially. She took pride in exhibiting her students' work throughout the peninsula. She was one of the founding members of the Burlingame Art in the Park and started the Skylight Studio on Lorton Avenue. Ms. Cole also hosted a weekly painting class on public access cable and KCSM TV. She lived her life in the moment with purpose, and even when her health was in decline, she relished each day. Is there anyone else my colleagues would like to acknowledge this evening? I know we've had a break, so there might have been some that have passed away that I'm not aware of. Councilmember Beach.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In light of former Mayor Rosalie O'Mahony, and our other acknowledgement tonight, Miss Anastasia Cole. But I hate to pile it on, but I think there is one more member of our community that should be acknowledged, a neighbor and a friend, Liz Watson, a member of the OLA community. I'm sure many of you knew her well, but she had 4 children, married for 50 years, attended Mercy High School, also co-founded the preschool at OLA, traveled the world, had a wonderful family. Some children still continue and grandchildren live here in Burlingame. And she had a wonderful celebration of life, but she passed away on July 24th. So we'd like to remember her as well in our thoughts tonight. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Beach. I forgot to mention Miss Watson. So just a few moments of silence, please. Thank you very much. I just want to mention that our next City Council meeting is on the 7th of September. So it will be the day after Labor Day. So it will be on a Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Have a good evening.
Good evening. Thank you.